My beloved child. Stop scrolling for a moment. Something is waiting for you here, and before you decide that this is only another message passing through your screen, pause. Take one slow breath. Let the noise around you become quiet for just a few seconds, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you at a very particular moment in your life. You may not understand why your heart suddenly feels heavy. You may not understand why a memory you thought you had buried has returned. You may not understand why the name of someone you once loved, trusted, or desperately wanted to understand has been appearing in your thoughts again. But heaven understands. And tonight, there is a truth coming to the surface that has been hidden beneath silence, pride, fear, family pressure, and words that were never spoken when they should have been. My child, there was a separation. But the separation was not the whole story. You saw the distance. You saw the unanswered messages. You saw the coldness. You saw someone you loved suddenly become different. You watched circumstances change so quickly that you were left wondering whether everything you had felt was ever real. And perhaps the most painful question was this. Why did they let me go so easily? You asked that question in private. Maybe you never said it aloud. Maybe you smiled in front of everyone and pretended you were fine. Maybe you told yourself that if someone could walk away, then you had to let them walk away. But deep inside, there was a part of you that never accepted the explanation. Something never added up. There was always a missing piece. And now, my beloved child, that missing piece is beginning to move. Someone who helped create the distance between you and your soulmate has finally reached the point where they cannot carry the secret anymore. They have been silent. They have watched. They have remembered. And they have lived with the knowledge of what really happened. For a long time, they convinced themselves that silence was safer. They told themselves that they were protecting the family. They told themselves that they were preventing complications. They told themselves that you and your soulmate would eventually forget each other. They thought time would erase everything. But time did something they never expected. Time revealed that what they tried to separate was not as fragile as they believed. Because your soulmate did not simply forget you. They tried. That is the part you were never allowed to see. They tried to move forward. They tried to act normal. They tried to laugh when other people laughed. They tried to listen when family members told them what they should do. They tried to convince themselves that what happened between you belonged to the past. But every attempt to bury the memory only made the memory deeper. And someone in that family noticed. Someone saw the change. Someone saw the silence after your name was mentioned. Someone noticed the way your soulmate became distant during conversations. Someone noticed that certain songs, places, dates, or ordinary little things could suddenly change their entire mood. And eventually, someone began asking questions. At first, your soulmate said nothing. Then they became defensive. Then they became quiet. And finally, they said something that frightened the person who had been trying to keep the truth hidden. They said, "You don't know what really happened." Those words changed everything. Because the person listening already believed they knew the story. They thought they knew why you two separated. They thought you were the problem. They thought your soulmate had simply lost interest. They thought the relationship had failed naturally. They thought there was nothing more to understand. But then they discovered that the version of the story they had been given was incomplete. And when they learned what had been left out, they could not look at the situation the same way again. My child, there are moments when truth does not enter a room gently. Sometimes truth walks into a room and changes the temperature. Sometimes one sentence is enough to make an entire family go silent. Sometimes one confession forces people to revisit every decision they thought they had made for the right reasons. And that is what is beginning to happen here. The person who helped separate you from your soulmate is not necessarily the person you suspected. That is why this revelation may feel so unexpected. You may have blamed one person. You may have believed another person was responsible. You may have spent months, perhaps years, trying to understand who influenced your soulmate. But the truth is more complicated. There was a chain of decisions. There were conversations you never heard. There were private opinions spoken behind closed doors. There were moments when someone could have defended you but chose silence. There were moments when someone could have told the truth but decided it was better to protect someone's reputation. And there was one conversation in particular that became the turning point. You were not there. Your soulmate was not fully aware of what was being said. But someone else heard it. Someone remembered it. And now that person has finally decided that the secret has become heavier than the silence. My beloved child, listen carefully. Do not let this message make you afraid. This is not about revenge. It is not about watching someone suffer. It is not about celebrating another person's regret. This is about understanding. Because sometimes closure does not arrive in the form you imagined. Sometimes closure is not an apology. Sometimes it is not a reunion. Sometimes it is simply the moment when you finally understand that the rejection you carried was never a measurement of your worth. You were not unlovable. You were not insufficient. You were not forgotten. You were not necessarily abandoned because your soulmate stopped caring. There were influences around the situation that you could not see. And while you were blaming yourself, someone else was carrying knowledge you did not have. Imagine sitting in a family room late at night. The lights are low. Everyone believes the conversation is over. Your soulmate is there, quiet. A family member is there too. And then the person who has remained silent for so long finally speaks. Their voice is different. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of protecting a story that no longer deserves protection. And they say, I need to tell you something. The room becomes still. Your soulmate looks up. They immediately know this is serious. The person hesitates. For several seconds, nobody speaks. Then comes the sentence that changes everything. I was there when they told us what to believe about you. Your soulmate's expression changes. What do you mean? And suddenly, the person begins telling a story that has been locked away. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to reveal that the separation was influenced by a conversation that happened behind your back. Enough to reveal that your soulmate was not given the full picture. Enough to reveal that certain things about you were exaggerated. Certain words were taken out of context. Certain fears were presented as facts. And someone used uncertainty to create distance. My child, this is where the story becomes deeper. Because your soulmate may have believed those words for a while. That is the painful part. They may have trusted the person speaking. They may have thought, why would my family lie to me? They may have thought the warnings were coming from love. They may have believed that people around them were protecting them from making a mistake. So they pulled away. And you were left standing outside the door of a decision you did not understand. You wondered what you had done. You replayed conversations. You searched for mistakes. You examined your own personality. You wondered if you had been too emotional. Too available. Too distant. Too trusting. Too demanding. Not enough. But the truth is, my child, you were trying to solve a puzzle while someone had removed pieces from the table. How could you possibly see the whole picture? You could not. And perhaps that is why your heart never fully accepted the ending. There was something in you that kept saying, this doesn't make sense. You tried to silence that feeling. You told yourself to move on. You told yourself that if they wanted you, they would have stayed. But somewhere beneath all of that, you sensed that something had happened before the final goodbye. And now, the person who knows something about that moment is beginning to speak. But there is something else you need to understand. The person who separated you and your soulmate may not have done it because they hated you. This is where the revelation becomes more complicated. They may have believed they were doing the right thing. They may have been afraid. They may have had their own expectations. They may have believed that your soulmate should choose a safer path, a more predictable path, a path that made the family comfortable. And when your connection became serious, fear entered the picture. Because your relationship represented something they could not control. Your soulmate was making emotional decisions rather than simply following the expectations of others. And someone became uncomfortable with that. They began asking questions. What if this doesn't work? What will people say? What if they get hurt? What if this person changes their life? What if they choose love over what everyone expects? Those questions may sound reasonable. But fear disguised as concern can become powerful. And slowly, concern can become influence. Influence can become pressure. Pressure can become manipulation. And manipulation can become separation. That is how it happened. Not in one dramatic moment. Not with one villain standing in the shadows. But through a series of small conversations that slowly changed the way your soulmate saw you. One comment here. One warning there. One misunderstood situation. One exaggerated story. One carefully chosen omission. Until eventually, your soulmate was looking at you through someone else's fear. And you were wondering why the person who once saw your heart suddenly seemed unable to recognize it. My child, there is a reason this message feels personal. Because the truth is not simply about what happened to you. It is about what happened inside you afterward. You began questioning your own intuition. You began wondering whether your feelings were foolish. You began believing that perhaps you had imagined the connection. You may have asked heaven, if this person was not meant for me, why did I feel so deeply? And maybe there were nights when you cried without telling anyone. Maybe you opened old messages. Maybe you stared at photographs. Maybe you almost reached out and then stopped yourself. Maybe you typed words that you never sent. Maybe your heart wanted one final explanation. And perhaps you never received it. But heaven saw every unsent message. Every silent prayer. Every night when you told yourself you were okay while your heart was saying something completely different. You thought nobody knew. But you were never unseen. And now, something that was hidden is beginning to surface. The person who knows the truth has reached a crossroads. They can continue protecting the old story. Or they can finally tell the truth. And they are beginning to understand that silence has consequences. Because every year they remained silent, your soulmate carried an incomplete story. Every time they allowed your name to be misunderstood, they helped preserve a false conclusion. Every time they watched your soulmate struggle and said nothing, the weight became heavier. Until one day, something happened that they could not ignore. Your soulmate asked a question. A simple question. But it struck directly at the secret. They asked. Did you ever actually hear what happened from them? Silence. That silence answered more than words could have. Your soulmate noticed. They looked at the person. Why aren't you answering? Still silence. And then the person finally said. No. Your soulmate stared. No, what? I never heard their side. That sentence opened the door. Because your soulmate suddenly realized something. They had made one of the biggest decisions of their emotional life without hearing the full truth from the person they were separating from. Imagine that realization. Imagine remembering every conversation. Every accusation. Every warning. Every moment when you were pushed away. And suddenly wondering. What if I was wrong? My beloved child, that question can shake a person's entire world. Because it forces them to revisit memories they thought were settled. They begin remembering your face. Your voice. The way you looked at them. The promises. The little moments that never made sense after the separation. They remember things they had tried to forget. And then they realize something painful. You may have been waiting for an explanation while they were waiting for permission to believe you. And those are not the same thing. Your soulmate may have wanted to trust you. But fear had become louder than love. Now fear is beginning to lose its voice. And this is where the family becomes unprepared. Because the person who remained silent has more to say. They do not simply reveal that you were misunderstood. They reveal why. They reveal what they were told. They reveal what was intentionally left out. They reveal who started the conversation. And most importantly, they reveal what happened after you were gone. That part has not been spoken yet. But it is coming. And when it is spoken, your soulmate will have to confront something they have avoided for a long time. They will have to admit that the story they believed about you may never have been complete. My child, do not rush past this moment. Because there is something deeply important here. You have spent too much time asking whether your soulmate still thinks about you. The deeper question is whether your soulmate ever truly stopped. And the answer emerging from this story is no. They carried something. Maybe they did not understand it. Maybe they buried it. Maybe they convinced themselves that it was simply nostalgia. But something remained. A quiet emotional thread. A memory that refused to disappear. And sometimes, no matter how much people try to move on, the truth has a way of returning through unexpected doors. A name appears. A place is mentioned. A familiar song plays. Someone asks an innocent question. A photograph resurfaces. An old conversation is remembered differently. And suddenly, the past is no longer dead. It is asking to be understood. That is what is happening now. The person who helped create the separation is beginning to realize that they cannot control what happens next. They can only decide whether to tell the truth. And they are preparing to do something they once promised themselves they would never do. They are preparing to speak directly to your soulmate. Not through another family member. Not through hints. Not through rumors. Directly. And they know that once they begin, they may not be able to stop. Because the truth has layers. First comes the explanation. Then comes the confession. Then comes the detail. And finally comes the part they are most afraid to reveal. The part that could change how your soulmate sees the entire family situation. My beloved child, you may be wondering why this person stayed silent for so long. There are many reasons. Fear of conflict. Fear of being blamed. Fear of losing trust. Fear of exposing someone they loved. Fear of admitting they participated in something they now regret. But there is another reason. They were waiting for the right moment. And that moment arrived when they realized that your soulmate was not healing. They thought separating you would make everything easier. Instead, something unexpected happened. Your soulmate became emotionally distant from everyone. They stopped sharing certain feelings. They stopped trusting advice. They became more private. And slowly, the family began to realize that the decision they thought would bring peace had created another kind of pain. The separation did not erase the connection. It created silence around it. And silence can hide pain for a while. But eventually, pain asks to be heard. One evening, your soulmate finally said something that nobody expected. They said, "I don't think I ever stopped loving them." The room went quiet. The person who had been carrying the secret felt something inside them collapse. Because those words confirmed what they had feared. The separation had not worked. It had only delayed the truth. And now the person who helped create the distance had to decide whether to continue protecting the past or finally release the truth. They chose the truth. But before they could tell everything, someone else entered the conversation. Someone who had never expected the secret to come out. And suddenly, the family dynamic changed. Voices became tense. Questions were asked. Old accusations returned. Someone said, "Why are you bringing this up now?" The person answered, "Because they deserve to know." Who? The room became silent. And then came your name. My child, imagine the weight of hearing your name spoken in a room where your story had been discussed many times without you. Imagine your soulmate sitting there, hearing people talk about the person they were once told to forget. And then hearing someone say, "We didn't tell you everything." Those words are not an ending. They are a doorway. Because your soulmate will ask the question that has been waiting beneath the entire story. What didn't you tell me? Nobody answers immediately. And that silence is where part 1 must leave you. Because the truth is larger than the separation itself. The truth is about what happened before the separation. It is about who influenced the decision. It is about what your soulmate was led to believe. And it is about the one piece of information that was deliberately kept from them. That piece is the reason someone has been afraid to speak. That piece is the reason the family is not prepared. And that piece is the reason your soulmate may soon look at the entire past differently. My beloved child, before you leave this message, remember this. Do not allow another person's decision to become the definition of your worth. You do not need to chase anyone to prove that you were worthy of love. You do not need to force a door open. You do not need to beg for an explanation. What is hidden does not remain hidden forever. Truth has its own timing. And sometimes heaven does not reveal everything at once because your heart needs time to understand what your mind could never explain. You thought the story ended when you were separated. It did not. You thought silence meant the truth was gone. It did not. You thought your soulmate's distance meant you had been forgotten. That may not have been the truth either. And now someone who once stood quietly on the other side of the story has finally moved. They have taken the first step. They have opened the door. They have spoken the first sentence. But they have not yet revealed the most important part. Because when your soulmate asks, "What exactly happened?" the person will finally have to choose between protecting someone's reputation and telling the truth about you. And when they begin describing that night, when they reveal the words that were spoken, when they explain what your soulmate was told before walking away from you, there will be one detail that nobody in that family expected to hear. One detail that changes the meaning of everything. One detail that may explain why your soulmate never truly moved on. One detail that may explain why they still carry your memory. And one detail that could make your soulmate realize that the person they were told to walk away from was never the person they were warned about. The room is waiting. Your soulmate is waiting. The person holding the secret is finally ready. And just as they begin to speak the sentence that could expose everything, someone in the family interrupts them. They say, "Don't tell them that." And the person holding the secret looks directly at your soulmate. Then they answer with words that make the entire room go silent. No. They deserve to know. And what they reveal next is the one thing your soulmate was never supposed to discover.